Irish teen's incredible invention may hold the key to saving our planet. At some point in your life, you were probably told you were too young to do something. Well, hopefully you didn't listen, because day in and day out, those deemed too young to succeed continue to prove that age is just a number. In today's world, a 10-year-old can become a millionaire, and teenagers can top the music charts overnight. For one Irish teen, age wasn't going to stop him from leaving his mark on the world. And after discovering a potential solution to one of mankind's most pressing needs, he immediately set out to make it happen. Now this young man's invention has finally been unveiled, and with it, we may very well have found the key to saving life as we know it. At just 18 years old, Fionn Ferreira was an aspiring artist from West Cork, a region in Southern Ireland. While there, he became all too familiar with a certain substance that was threatening his home. See, the ocean was a big part of Fionn's life. But you don't have to live on the coast to understand how truly enormous the ocean is. Covering a staggering 139,434,000 square miles, the waters of our ocean account for more than 70% of the Earth's surface. With that in mind, it should come as no surprise that 80% of all life on our planet is found in the ocean. Given that we've only explored about 10% of these waters, there's no telling how many creatures actually call the ocean home. But despite the seemingly unfathomable amount of aquatic life here, recent estimates place the number at upwards of 3 trillion organisms. Each and every creature that swims in our oceans currently faces an enormous threat. This danger was the substance that threatened Fionn's home. Large quantities of microplastics, which are fragments of plastic less than 5 millimeters in length, are churning up in the environment all over the world. These bits of pollution are the product of larger plastics degrading in our ocean, though they also originate from wastewater treatment centers that are unable to filter them out. Unlike standard plastic pollution, microplastics are small enough to be absorbed into the environment, mixing with sand, rock, and even the water itself. These particles are then consumed by aquatic life, becoming part of the creature and poisoning them as a result. In many cases, these fragments also make their way back to us in the fish we consume. It's estimated that Americans consume up to 52,000 microplastic particles each year, though as of now their effects on us remain unknown. One fear, however, is that some of these microplastics may contain toxic chemicals, like phthalates and bisphenol A, BPA. These substances have been linked to cancer and reproductive issues in humans, giving us yet another reason to keep our oceans clean. To Fionn's dismay, these microplastics aren't just found in places where humans reside. They're beginning to turn up in the farthest reaches of the globe. Just recently, in fact, samples taken from the Arctic glaciers revealed that microplastic particles are present there, too. Removing these fragments from our oceans has become a top priority for scientists, though the process isn't so clear-cut. Because the average bit of microplastics is about the size of a sesame seed, even the world's brightest minds have struggled to find a way to get the job done. Until Fionn noticed something. While kayaking one day, Fionn came across several microplastic fragments acting in a peculiar way. After a recent tanker spill had washed oil onto the rocks of a nearby island, Fionn found that plastic stuck to the oil almost like metal to a magnet. Because both plastic and oil are non-polar, they're more inclined to stick to one another in nature. A light bulb went off in Fionn's head, and after returning home from his day at sea, he hopped online and Googled the name Steve Papel. A NASA engineer in the 1960s, Papel was tasked with finding a way to make rocket fuel magnetic so it could survive zero gravity during the Apollo space missions. He did just that in 1963 by producing ferrofluid, a liquid that becomes strongly magnetized in the presence of a magnetic field. Today, ferrofluid can most commonly be found in speakers and other electronics, where it's used to help control vibration and seal out debris. But could the key to saving our oceans really be found in the iPhones and tablets we use every day? Rather than smash open a few laptops, Fionn opted to create his own ferrofluid using magnetite powder and vegetable oil. Not only would this be a cheaper alternative to the real thing, but it would also pose no risk of releasing harmful substances into the environment. Fionn was so confident in his experiment's effectiveness that in 2019, he resolved to enter it in the annual Google Science Fair in Mountain View, California. Before a panel of top judges, Fionn wagered that he could remove at least 85% of microplastics from a polluted water sample. He began by injecting his ferrofluid into the water, which immediately turned the sample completely black. However, after placing a magnet next to the solution, the sample cleared, revealing a nearly crystal clear glass of water. In the end, Fionn actually exceeded his own expectations. He was able to remove 88% of the microplastic particles from the water sample. For his incredible efforts, the 18-year-old was awarded first prize at the fair and received $50,000 to continue his research. Shortly after his amazing win, Fionn began studying at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands, one of the world's most prestigious research universities. Here, the budding scientist hopes to perfect his experiment so that it may one day help save our world. But according to Fionn, it's going to take more than just a little vegetable oil and magnetite to fix the damage we've done. I'm not saying my project is the solution. The solution is that we stop using plastic altogether. Reducing the world's plastic usage to zero would certainly help to quell the growing microplastic threat, and many countries have already come out in support of this proposal. However, when the United Nations Environment Assembly met in 2019, their primary concern involved a different problem entirely. Among the smorgasbord of environmental issues, deforestation posed a particularly large threat to the international community. The Earth was losing over 18 million acres of greenery each year. Skeptics will downplay the effects of this trend. Wood is a major resource. How can we just stop harvesting it? How much harm could a few extra logs do to the planet? Well, even in an urbanized society, forests remain one of our most valuable assets. Of course, these wooded areas serve as the habitat for countless plant and animal species. Without a stable home, these creatures could be in danger of going extinct. But deforestation is also a problem for humans. It's no secret that man-made emissions of carbon dioxide are permanently raising temperatures all over Earth. It's unclear if we could turn back this tide, but without robust forests, we don't stand a chance. Areas of dense vegetation serve as a sort of sponge for carbon dioxide. Plus, they'll also keep moisture inside the soil. But with their influence shrinking, climate change is brewing strange weather patterns that are endangering people everywhere. NASA has monitored these effects using satellite technology. Years of data from MODIS, Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer, have shown unexpected shifts in greenery over recent periods. For most of the 21st century, the drop in trees has allowed temperatures to rise and water to escape, thus transforming lush agricultural areas into virtual deserts. This process has forced entire communities to leave their homes. Particularly in China, which contains a small percentage of the world's forests compared to its massive size, desertification became an incredible danger. If the dust storms in center city Beijing were any indication, the Chinese were quickly losing their country. Zhang Zhailong, director of China's Forestry Administration, understood the dire situation required an immediate response. Pulling a few strings with friends he had in other parts of the government, he set a bold plan into action. The rest of the world, however, wasn't aware of the forestry solution at the time. They only noticed it in 2019, when NASA's satellites picked up on a startling find on Earth's surface below. Thanks to the work of concerned environmentalists everywhere, greening was on the rise. All of a sudden, however, about 25% of that growth appeared to be coming out of China. Only a few years prior, it looked like it was on the verge of becoming a sandbox. Clearly, this was no happy accident. With the trees sprouting in such neatly organized rows in many of the most vulnerable regions of China, only a human operation could be responsible. But how did this all happen so quickly? It turns out that Zhang convinced the government to lend him the assistance of 60,000 soldiers. Instead of carrying rifles, however, these troops trudged out to the environmental battlefield with shovels and gardening tools. When the first spade broke through the dirt, the 3 North Shelter Forest Program was underway. The troops got to work planting thousands of trees to form an artificial forest. Ultimately, the plan was to build a Great Green Wall. Naturally, the strategy isn't a guaranteed success. Ecologist Zhang Xiaoming pointed out that the government had planted much of the greenery in spaces not capable of sustaining plant life. Many of the trees will die out before too long. For the short term at least, China's forests have boomed. The renewed greenery elongated the growing season and lessened the severity of dust storms. Best of all, the program inspired similar efforts worldwide. India suffered from many of the same industrial and ecological problems as China, so they too turned their attention to forestry. Summoning a huge number of volunteers, the country managed to plant a record 66 million saplings in just half a day. India also upgraded its irrigation systems nationwide, bringing water to previously dried out areas. While this process does siphon moisture away from other areas, it's been effective at fighting back against desertification. Given the current state of our planet, a ton of work is necessary to keep our world beautiful and livable. But whether you're a soldier or a civilian, anyone can make a difference. For instance, Sebastião Salgado, a Brazilian photojournalist, made a huge impact after spending years abroad highlighting injustices across the globe. When he saw the effects of deforestation, he and his wife cooked up an unbelievable scheme to help out. See, the earth mattered to him a lot. He took photos that told stories about war, famine, poverty, disease, and violence. But fans of his work found relief in Salgado's nature photos, which portrayed the power of our planet. His wife, Lilia Deliz Wanik Salgado, wrote and edited the content of his photography books and produced a documentary about her husband's work called The Salt of the Earth. Together, they saw all there was to see, or so they thought. Back in 1994, the couple spent months documenting the Rwandan genocide. Understandably, the horror left them feeling broken. And when the war was over, all they wanted was to rest up in their hometown in Brazil. After having been on the road for years on end, seeing Minas Gerais, Brazil felt like a huge relief at first. That was until the Salgados began to notice the change in the landscape around them. Their home hardly looked familiar anymore. The trees outside their land had vanished, and all that remained were empty stretches of dirt. While this region is not part of the Amazon forest, its flora is supposed to be quite similar. Clearly, that was no longer the case. Deforestation has plagued South America for decades now, as the demand for wood just keeps rising. In fact, Brazil specifically has seen the highest deforestation rates of natural forests in the continent, and most of it's done illegally. Between 2000 and 2008, both legal and illegal deforestation turned Brazil into a shell of its former self, with satellite images picking up less green year after year. Sebastião and his wife recognized this, and it broke their hearts. The land was as sick as I was. Everything was destroyed, Sebastião told The Guardian in 2015. Only about 0.5% of the land was covered in trees. Without drastic intervention, he knew that number would soon likely be zero. Suddenly, my wife had a fabulous idea to replant this forest, Sebastião recalled. It was a tall order, one the couple wasn't even sure was possible. Could they even put a dent in deforestation impact? They knew they had to try. So they gathered all the manpower they could and went to work. The plan was to gather the remaining seeds from the local region and carefully plant them one by one to get natural fauna to return to the area as well. Every day for years on end, Salgados and a few volunteers woke up, put on their gear, and worked for hours on end to undo the damage and rebuild the forest that once adorned this province. Trees and plants needing a little extra TLC were grown in several greenhouses the Salgados built. There, Lilia looked after them with the help of a local gardening expert. The more flora that survived and grew, the more land they could recover. And as time went by, seeds grew roots, roots grew branches, and branches grew leaves. It was difficult for the hard workers to not see their progress overnight, but after several months, their blood, sweat, and tears began to pay off. As the trees grew, Sebastião felt peace. All the insects and birds and fish returned, and thanks to this increase of the trees, he said, I too was reborn. This was the most important moment. We need to listen to the words of the people of the land, Sebastião explained. Nature's the earth and its other beings, and if we don't have some kind of spiritual return to our planet, I fear that we'll be compromised. Over 2 decades, the 1,700-acre forest was almost completely restored by planting nearly 300 different types of trees and plants, which caused a whopping 172 bird species to return to the area. Along with the birds, 33 endangered mammal species and 15 endangered reptile species were welcomed back into the native home. This meant the world for animals like the orangutan, which suffered greatly from deforestation. The Salgados' work was unbelievable, and they proved small groups can make a huge difference. Planting more trees, plants, and flowers is a fantastic place to start, even if you don't have many resources.